The massive crystal doors of the Galactic Council chamber swung open with a soft hum. Commander James Steele led his small group of human soldiers into the grand hall, their boots clicking against the polished floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, drawing the attention of the towering alien representatives, seated in tiered rows above them. The humans, standing at an average height of 6 feet, looked like children next to the giant alien council members. Most of the alien species present stood between 9 and 12 feet tall, their massive forms casting long shadows over the human delegation. Steele kept his face neutral as whispers and barely hidden chuckles spread through the chamber. He had expected this reaction. After all, this was humanity's first official military presentation to the Galactic Council, and appearances meant everything in these initial meetings. Admiral Cax, the military committee head, leaned forward in his massive chair. His purple-scaled face showed clear amusement as he looked down at the human soldiers. "So, this is Earth's mighty military delegation." His booming voice carried a hint of mockery. "I was expecting more." Steele stepped forward, his power armor whirring softly. "Admiral, we bring a contingent of 100 of Earth's finest soldiers. We're here to discuss Earth's application for military alliance with the Council." This statement triggered open laughter from several council members. Admiral Cax raised his hand, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity in the proceedings, but his own shoulders shook with barely contained mirth. "Commander Steele," Cax said, still fighting back his amusement, "you must understand our surprise. The smallest combat-capable species in our records stands at least 8 feet tall. Your people are simply—" He paused, searching for a diplomatic word, "inadequate for modern galactic warfare." Steele noticed how the alien representatives' eyes kept drifting to their power armor. The aliens clearly saw it as a cute attempt to compensate for their size. If they only knew what those suits could really do. "With all due respect, Admiral," Steele replied calmly, "size isn't everything in warfare. Earth has a rich military history that—" Yes, Cax interrupted, waving one massive hand dismissively. "We've reviewed your historical records. Impressive for planetary conflicts, but galactic warfare is an entirely different matter. The forces you might face." He gestured to a holographic display showing various alien species, each more massive than the last. The human soldiers remained at perfect attention, their discipline unwavering despite the condescension. Steele could feel their restraint, their burning desire to demonstrate what humans were truly capable of. But that wasn't part of the plan. Not yet. "The Council has made its decision," Cax announced formally. "Earth's application for military alliance is denied. However," he added, trying to sound generous, "we are willing to classify your species as a protected civilization. You'll receive full defensive benefits from the Council fleet." Steele maintained his professional composure, even as more chuckles echoed through the chamber. "And if Earth wished to contribute to Council defense in other ways." Cax's expression softened slightly, perhaps feeling a bit guilty about the mockery. "Of course. Support roles are always available. Medical teams, maintenance crews, administrative positions, areas where physical size is less crucial." The commander nodded slowly, his face revealing nothing. "We accept these terms, Admiral. Earth will be happy to serve in support positions until we can prove our worth." As the human delegation turned to leave, one of the younger alien representatives couldn't resist a final jab. "Don't worry, little ones. The big, strong aliens will protect you." Steele allowed himself a small smile as they walked out, hidden from the Council's view. They had no idea what they had just witnessed wasn't Earth's military might. It was Earth's restraint. Back on their ship, Lieutenant Tom Rivers approached Steele. "They fell for it, sir. Hook, line, and sinker." Steele looked out the viewport at the massive Council ships floating in space. "Completely. They see exactly what they expected to see. A small, weak species trying to play soldier." He turned to his troops with a glint in his eye. "Send word back to Earth. Phase 1 is complete. Time to prepare Phase 2. The soldiers grinned, knowing that somewhere in the vastness of space, an enemy was coming. An enemy that would teach the Council the difference between size and capability. And when that day came, humanity would show the galaxy why you should never judge a species by its height. 3 months after Earth's failed military presentation, alarms blared through the Galactic Council's emergency chamber. Admiral Cax burst through the doors, his massive frame moving with unexpected speed. The chamber was already filled with representatives from various worlds, their faces showing different levels of concern. "The reports are confirmed," Cax announced, his earlier arrogance replaced by grim determination. "The Ravagers have entered Council space." The room erupted in chaos. Everyone knew about the Ravagers, a species that had destroyed 12 civilizations in the past year alone. They weren't particularly advanced, but they made up for it with overwhelming numbers and brutal strength. Holographic displays lit up the chamber center, showing massive Ravager ships moving through space. Each vessel was crude but effective, essentially a giant metal box packed with warriors who stood even taller than the Council races. "How many?" asked one of the representatives, their voice shaking. "Initial scans show 3,000 ships," Cax replied, each carrying approximately 10,000 warriors. He didn't need to do the math for them. 30 million Ravager warriors were heading their way. In the back of the chamber, Commander Steele sat quietly with a small human delegation. They had been invited as a courtesy, given their protected species status. No one paid them much attention as the Council races argued about battle plans. "We must gather our forces," shouted the war chief of the Rocky Plains, his stone-like skin grinding as he gestured. "Meet them in open space." "No," countered another. "Defend our core worlds first." Admiral Cax raised his massive hands for silence. "Our latest intelligence suggests they're heading for the frontier colonies first. We have 2 weeks to prepare our defenses." As the Council races argued about troop deployments, Steele cleared his throat. The small sound somehow caught everyone's attention. "Earth would like to offer assistance," he said calmly. There was a moment of awkward silence before several representatives burst out laughing, despite the serious situation. "Commander Steele," Cax said, trying to be diplomatic, "we appreciate the offer, but this is far beyond your capabilities. The Ravagers are even larger than we are. Their warriors stand 15 feet tall on average." Steele nodded patiently. "Nevertheless, we have experience in asymmetric warfare. We could help in support roles, as agreed." Cax thought for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. You can help with medical support and evacuation of civilians, but stay away from direct combat zones. We wouldn't want your people to get hurt." Steele bowed slightly. "Thank you, Admiral. We'll prepare our support teams immediately." He turned and left the chamber with his delegation. Once they were back on their ship, Lieutenant Rivers couldn't contain his grin. "Support teams, sir." Steele smiled as he pressed a button on his communicator. A hidden compartment in the wall slid open, revealing rows of advanced combat suits, far more sophisticated than what they'd shown the Council. "Special Forces Team Delta is already in position near the frontier colonies," Steele said. "Teams Alpha through Charlie are on their way. And yes, Lieutenant, we're sending our support teams too." He walked over to a large holographic display showing Earth's full military deployment. Hundreds of ships were moving into position, hidden from the Council's detection systems by technology they hadn't thought to look for in a primitive species. "The Ravagers are about to learn why humans developed special forces," Steele said, studying the display. "And the Council? Well, they're about to learn why you should never judge a species by their size." A young soldier raised his hand. "Sir, shouldn't we tell the Council what we're really capable of? They could be preparing better defenses if they knew." Steele shook his head. "Sometimes the best lesson is a practical demonstration. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "they wouldn't believe us anyway." "Not yet." As they watched, more hidden human ships moved into position throughout Council space. They weren't the biggest ships or the most impressive looking. But like the soldiers they carried, They were fast, agile, and far more lethal than their size suggested. "Send word to all teams," Steele ordered. "Operation Small Package is now active. Let's show the galaxy what humanity's support forces can really do." The crew smiled as they went to work. Soon, very soon, the Ravagers would learn that the most dangerous predators aren't always the biggest ones. Sometimes, they're the ones you never see coming. The frontier colony of New Haven was burning. Massive Ravager warriors stomped through the streets, their 15-foot frames crushing everything in their path. The Council's defensive forces fought bravely, but they were being pushed back block by block. Admiral Cax watched from his command center as another building collapsed. His giant soldiers, despite their size and strength, couldn't match the Ravagers' sheer numbers. For every one they took down, 5 more appeared. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "the human support teams are requesting permission to enter the combat zone. They say they have medical personnel ready." Cax growled in frustration. "Tell them to stay back. This is no place for—" He stopped mid-sentence as something unusual appeared on his tactical display. Small dots, moving impossibly fast, were weaving through the buildings. At first, he thought they were drones, but the signatures were organic. "Human. What are they doing?" Cax demanded, watching as dozens of these signatures zipped between the buildings, heading straight for the Ravager forces. The answer came moments later. A Ravager war party, 20 strong, was smashing through a defensive line when something small and fast dropped from above. It was a human in powered armor, but nothing like the basic suits they'd shown the Council. This armor was sleek, advanced, and clearly built for combat. The human soldier, barely reaching the Ravager's waist, moved like lightning. Before the massive aliens could react, 3 of them were down, their weak points hit with surgical precision. The others roared and swung their huge weapons, but the human was already gone, sliding between their legs and emerging behind them. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Small teams of humans in advanced armor appeared everywhere, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the chaos. They moved through spaces the larger aliens couldn't reach, used debris as cover, and turned the urban environment into a deadly maze. "Impossible," Cax whispered, watching the tactical display. The tiny dots were decimating Ravager forces many times their size. When a group of Ravagers would corner one human, 3 more would appear from unexpected angles, their weapons cutting through the alien's armor at precisely the weakest points. Lieutenant Rivers moved through the battle alongside his squad, their enhanced armor making them faster and more agile than any of the giant aliens expected. They had trained for years for this type of combat, using their size as an advantage rather than a weakness. Team 3, there's a group of Council troops pinned down 2 blocks north. Rivers called over the comm. "Let's show them how Earth handles urban warfare." The human squad moved like ghosts through the rubble. They emerged behind the Ravager position, their weapons already targeting critical joints and vulnerabilities. 6 Ravagers fell before the others even turned around. By then, it was too late. The trapped Council soldiers watched in amazement as these tiny warriors dismantled a Ravager assault team with terrifying efficiency. Every movement was purposeful, every shot precise. This wasn't just fighting. This was combat as an art form. Back in the command center, Admiral Cax couldn't take his eyes off the tactical displays. The human support teams had turned the tide of battle in less than an hour. The Ravagers, for the first time, were retreating. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "Commander Steele is requesting permission to deploy more support personnel." Cax stared at the battlefield footage, watching a human soldier take down a Ravager 3 times their size with a series of perfectly executed moves. "Grant them whatever they request," he said, his voice humble for the first time since meeting the humans. As the sun set over New Haven, the Ravagers had been pushed back to their landing zones. The cost in lives and property had been high, but the colony still stood. Among the ruins, Council soldiers watched with newfound respect as human teams moved through the battlefield, checking for survivors and eliminating remaining threats. Commander Steele's voice came over the General Command channel, calm as ever. "Admiral Cax, the support teams have completed their primary mission. Would you like us to proceed with counter-offensive operations?" This time, nobody laughed at the small soldiers. Instead, the giant aliens found themselves wondering what other surprises these tiny humans had in store. The battle for New Haven had changed everything. And this was just the beginning. 1 week after the Battle of New Haven, Admiral Cax sat in the Council's military analysis chamber, watching combat footage for the 20th time. The room was filled with military leaders from various species, all focused on the holographic display showing human soldiers in action. "Play it again," Cax ordered, leaning forward in his massive chair. "Focus on Squad 3's movement patterns." The footage showed 5 human soldiers taking down a group of 30 Ravagers. Every movement was precise, every shot calculated. The humans didn't waste energy on big swings or powerful blows like the larger species did. Instead, they struck at weak points, used momentum against their larger opponents, and worked together with incredible coordination. "Their size," one of the military analysts said, "it's not a weakness at all. They're using it as a weapon." Cax nodded slowly. "Look at how they move through spaces our soldiers can't even fit into. They're not just fighting, they're controlling the battlefield." The door opened, and Commander Steele walked in. The alien leaders, who once looked down at him with amusement, now stood up respectfully. "Commander," Cax said, his voice carrying a new tone of respect, "we've been studying your combat footage. There are terms in your reports we don't understand. Special forces, guerrilla warfare, asymmetric combat. Could you explain?" Steele smiled and walked to the holographic display. "In Earth's history, we often faced enemies that were bigger, stronger, or more numerous than us. We learned that victory doesn't always go to the largest army." He pulled up historical footage from Earth's military archives. The alien leaders watched in fascination as scenes played out from various human conflicts, small units achieving victory against overwhelming odds through skill, strategy, and surprise. "This is why we kept our true capabilities hidden," Steele explained. "In combat, being underestimated is an advantage. The Ravagers never expected warriors our size to be a threat. That overconfidence was their weakness." One of the alien generals raised his hand. "Your power armor, it's far more advanced than what you showed us initially." Steele nodded. "What we showed you was basic civilian construction equipment. Our combat suits are designed to enhance our natural advantages: speed, agility, and precision. Cax paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "We would like to request human training for our forces, not to copy your methods. We're too large for that, but to learn how to fight alongside you effectively." Steele's expression remained professional, but inside he felt satisfaction. This was exactly what Earth had hoped for, not just acceptance, but true military cooperation. "Of course, Admiral. But first, you need to understand how humans think about warfare." Steele brought up more tactical displays. "Size determines how you fight, but it doesn't determine if you win. Look here." For the next several hours, Steele explained basic human military concepts. The alien leaders learned about squad tactics, cover and concealment, and the importance of mobility. They were amazed to learn that humans had been fighting other humans for thousands of years, constantly improving their combat techniques despite everyone being the same size. "This is why we train so hard," Steele explained. "When everyone is the same size, victory goes to the smarter, better prepared force. We've spent our entire history learning to outthink our enemies, not just overpower them." Cax stood up, towering over Steele, but now with respect rather than condescension. "Commander, I owe you and Earth an apology. We judged you by our standards, not understanding that you had developed your own path to military excellence." Steele shook his head. No apology needed, Admiral. Instead, let's focus on combining our strengths. Your soldiers have power and durability we can't match. Ours have speed and precision you can't copy. Together, Cax finished. We might be unstoppable. As if to emphasize his point, new alerts flashed across the tactical displays. More Ravager ships had been detected entering Council space. But this time, there was no panic among the alien leaders. Instead, they turned to steel with anticipation. "Commander," Cax said, "how would your special forces handle this situation?" Steele smiled and began laying out a battle plan that would combine human tactics with Council species strength. The real war was about to begin, and the Ravagers were about to learn why underestimating humanity was the last mistake many species ever made. The massive war room of the Council's flagship hummed with activity as Commander Steele stood before a mixed group of human and alien soldiers. The sight was striking. Tiny humans in advanced combat armor standing shoulder to knee with giant alien warriors. 2 weeks of intensive joint training had brought them here. "This is Operation Shadow Giant," Steele announced, pointing to the holographic display of their target, a major Ravager supply base. "For the first time, we'll demonstrate what happens when human tactics meet Council strength." Admiral Cax stepped forward, his huge frame no longer intimidating to the humans present. "Our first combined strike teams are ready. Each unit will have 3 Council heavy infantry supported by 5 human Special Forces operators." The display showed their attack plan. It was unlike anything the Council had ever attempted before, a mix of stealth and strength that played to both species' advantages. Lieutenant Rivers led his team toward the Ravager base alongside 3 massive Council warriors. In the past, such a mixed group would have seemed ridiculous. Now, after intensive training, they moved like a single unit. "Contact ahead," Rivers whispered over the comm. "Standard formation, just like we practiced." The human operators spread out, moving through shadows and small spaces the larger aliens couldn't access. Their Council teammates held position, ready to provide the hammer to the human scalpel. A Ravager patrol approached, 15 massive warriors who never thought to look for enemies at their feet. The humans struck first, their precise shots disabling 3 Ravagers before they could react. As the others turned to face this threat, the Council warriors charged. It was beautiful chaos. The Ravagers couldn't handle this new fighting style. When they focused on the giant Council warriors, human operators would strike from blind spots. When they tried to spot the humans, the Council troops would smash through their distracted defenses. "Team 7, breach point secured," Rivers reported. Similar reports came in from around the base as more mixed teams penetrated the Ravager defenses. Inside the command center, Steele and Cax watched the operation unfold. "Your people learned our tactics surprisingly quickly," Steele commented. Cax nodded proudly. "And your soldiers adapted well to working with our greater strength. Look there." He pointed to a screen where a Council warrior had just launched a human operator high into the air, allowing them to strike a Ravager from above. The real test came when they reached the base's central hangar. Hundreds of Ravager warriors waited inside, but they faced something unprecedented. An enemy that attacked from all angles at once. Human operators swung from cables and maintenance walkways, their precise shots creating chaos. Council warriors charged through the main doors, now moving with a grace that matched their strength. The Ravagers, used to straightforward battles of strength, had no defense against this combination of power and precision. "Base control center secured," Rivers reported an hour later. "You won't believe what we found here, sir." Steele and Cax arrived to find their teams accessing the Ravager command computers. The data they discovered changed everything. Complete battle plans, fleet movements, and most importantly, the location of the Ravager homeworld. "They never expected to lose this base," Steele said, studying the data. "They thought their size and numbers made them invincible." Cax laughed, a sound that once frightened smaller species but now carried warmth. Just as we once thought about humans, how quickly things change. The success of Operation Shadow Giant marked a turning point in the war. News spread quickly through Council space. The unbeatable Ravagers had lost a major base to an army that combined human cunning with Council power. Back on the flagship, Steele addressed the victorious mixed teams. Today, we proved that size doesn't determine victory. Skill, strategy, and cooperation do. Each of you learned to see past physical differences to find strength in unity. A young human operator raised her hand. Sir, the Ravagers are pulling back in 3 sectors. They seem scared. Good. Cax rumbled. They should be. For the first time, they face an enemy that combines the best of 2 worlds. Human tactical brilliance and Council strength. Steele nodded in agreement. And this is just the beginning. Once word of this victory spreads, more Council species will want to join our combined teams. The Ravagers thought size was everything in war. They're about to learn otherwise. Cax finished. Humanity has taught us all a valuable lesson. True strength lies not in how tall you stand, but in how well you adapt, plan, and work together. As the briefing ended, humans and aliens left together, talking and even joking like old comrades. The sight would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Now it represented the future of galactic warfare, a future where size meant nothing compared to skill, strategy, and cooperation. The space around the Ravager homeworld blazed with weapons fire as the largest fleet in Council history emerged from faster-than-light travel. But this wasn't just a Council fleet anymore. It was the first true human Council combined armada. Commander Steele stood on the bridge of the flagship alongside Admiral Cax, watching as hundreds of ships moved into position. The massive Council warships formed the outer barrier, while smaller, faster human vessels weaved between them like nimble fish among whales. All combat teams report ready, Lieutenant Rivers announced over the command channel. Human Special Forces teams are in their drop pods. Council heavy assault units are in position. The Ravager homeworld loomed ahead, its orbital defenses bristling with weapons. The enemy had gathered their remaining forces here, nearly 40 million warriors ready to defend their home. Under normal circumstances, such numbers would make any attack impossible. But these weren't normal circumstances. Begin Operation Thunderstrike, Steele ordered. At once, thousands of tiny objects launched from the human ships. To the Ravager sensors, they looked like debris or small meteorites. In reality, each contained a team of human special forces in their most advanced stealth armor. Remember, Steele's voice carried to all human operators. Your job is to disable their planetary shields. Our Council allies will handle the heavy fighting once you do. The drops pods scattered across the planet's surface, penetrating the Ravager defenses through gaps too small for their sensors to track. The massive aliens had built their defenses to stop large ships and armies. They never thought to look for soldiers the size of children. Lieutenant Rivers led his team toward one of the main shield generators. They moved like ghosts through the massive corridors built for 15-foot warriors. The Ravagers never saw them coming. Shield Generator 1, disabled, Rivers reported. Similar reports began coming in from across the planet. That was the signal. Admiral Cax's voice boomed through the fleet. Council forces, begin the assault. The space battle erupted in earnest. Council warships charged forward, no longer fighting alone but supported by swarms of human vessels. When Ravager ships tried to concentrate fire on the larger Council ships, human crews would strike their blind spots. When they turned to chase the smaller ships, Council heavy weapons would tear them apart. On the planet's surface, the real revolution in warfare was taking place. Mixed teams of humans and Council warriors struck at key targets. The humans would infiltrate facilities, disable security systems, and create chaos, while their larger allies would smash through the weakened defenses with overwhelming force. They're falling back to the capital city, Steele observed, watching the tactical displays. Just as we predicted. Cax nodded. And now they learn the price of underestimating smaller species. He turned to his communications officer. Signal all forces. Execute final phase. The Ravager capital was built to be impregnable, its walls hundreds of feet tall and thick enough to stop any conventional army. But they had never faced an army like this. Human operators appeared from maintenance tunnels and ventilation systems, striking at power stations and defense controls. Council warriors burst through the weakened walls, no longer bombing blindly, but striking precisely at targets their human allies had marked. In the central fortress, the Ravager High Command watched in disbelief as their defenses crumbled. They had built their entire society around the belief that bigger meant better, that strength came from size alone. Now they watched as tiny humans disabled their weapons, scrambled their communications, and guided precision strikes from Council forces. Primary defense grid is down. Rivers reported from somewhere inside the fortress. Council forces have a clear path to the command center. The final assault was swift and decisive. Council heavy troops, guided by human tactical data, stormed the fortress. The Ravager leaders, for the first time in their history, faced an enemy they couldn't simply overpower. "They're signaling their surrender," Cax announced, almost in disbelief. "The Ravager High Command is surrendering unconditionally." Steele nodded, watching as the fighting died down across the planet. They finally learned what we've been trying to teach them. Size isn't everything. Skill, strategy, and cooperation matter more. As the dust settled over the Ravager capital, human operators emerged from their hiding spots to stand alongside their Council allies. The sight of 15-foot Ravagers surrendering to 6-foot humans would have seemed impossible just months ago. Admiral Cax turned to Steele, respect evident in his voice. "Your people have changed everything, Commander. The way we think about warfare, about strength, about each other. That's what humans do best," Steele replied with a smile. "We adapt, we innovate, and we help others see past their preconceptions." He looked at the tactical display showing the combined fleet. "This is just the beginning of what we can achieve together." The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different from the day humans first entered it. Where once there had been mockery and laughter at the sight of tiny humans, now there was respect and admiration. The victory celebration marking the end of the Ravager War had brought together species of all sizes from across the galaxy. Commander Steele stood at the center of the chamber, feeling a sense of satisfaction. This time, he didn't have to look up as much. The Council had installed new multi-level platforms so that all species, regardless of size, could interact comfortably at eye level. Admiral Cax approached the central platform, his massive frame moving with the new grace he had learned from human combat training. "Commander Steele," his voice boomed through the chamber, "the Council has gathered today not just to celebrate victory, but to correct a historic mistake." The Admiral activated a holographic display showing footage from that first meeting. Humans being laughed at, dismissed as too small to matter. Then it shifted to scenes from the war. Human special forces taking down Ravager strongholds, mixed combat teams working in perfect harmony, the final battle at the Ravager homeworld. "We judged you by your size," Cax continued, "and in doing so, we nearly missed the opportunity to learn from humanity's greatest strengths, your adaptability, your tactical thinking, and your ability to turn perceived weaknesses into advantages." Lieutenant Rivers, standing next to Steele, couldn't help but smile as the next announcement came. "Therefore," Cax declared, "Earth is hereby recognized as a primary military power within the Council. Furthermore, we are proud to announce the establishment of the first multi-species Special Forces Academy, with human instructors taking the lead in training the next generation of warriors." The chamber erupted in applause. Representatives from dozens of species, some even smaller than humans, cheered the announcement. The victory over the Ravagers had changed everything. Size was no longer the measure of a species' worth. Steele stepped forward to speak. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and accepted a role in support services, knowing that sometimes the best way to teach is to show rather than tell." He gestured to the mixed groups of soldiers around the room. "Look at us now. Every species brings its own strengths to our alliance. The Ravagers taught us all that relying on any single advantage, be it size, strength, or technology, leads to weakness. A young council recruit, nearly twice Steele's height, raised his hand. "Commander, is it true that I'll be training under human instructors at the new academy?" "Yes," Steele replied with a smile. "And you'll also train alongside species smaller than humans. Every graduate of the academy will learn to work with warriors of all sizes. That's the future of galactic warfare." Admiral Cax picked up a ceremonial weapon, a combination of council craftsmanship and human design principles. "Commander Steele, the council wishes to present you with this symbol of our new understanding." Its inscription reads, "Victory belongs not to the largest, but to the smartest, most adaptable, and most cooperative." As Steele accepted the massive weapon, which was almost as tall as he was, laughter filled the chamber. But this time, it was warm and inclusive, with humans laughing along. The ability to laugh at oneself, Steele had taught them, was another sign of true strength. The celebration continued as representatives from various species mingled, shared stories, and discussed future plans. In one corner, a tiny engineer species, even smaller than humans, was excitedly showing their new infiltration technology to a group of giant council warriors. In another, human special forces operators were teaching combat moves to aliens of various sizes. "Hard to believe this all started with them laughing at our tiny army," Rivers said to Steele. Steele watched as a massive council warrior carefully demonstrated shield tactics to a mixed group of smaller species. "Sometimes the best victories aren't won through force," he replied. "They're won by changing how people think." Admiral Cax joined them on the platform. "The Ravagers have requested permission to send their first students to the academy," he announced. "They say they want to learn what real strength means." Steele nodded approvingly. "Accept them. After all, the mark of true power isn't the ability to defeat your enemies, but the ability to turn them into allies," Cax finished, having learned this human wisdom well. The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different from the day humans first entered it. Where once there had been mockery and laughter at the sight of tiny humans, now there was respect and admiration. The victory celebration marking the end of the Ravager War had brought together species of all sizes from across the galaxy. Commander Steele stood at the center of the chamber, feeling a sense of satisfaction. This time, he didn't have to look up as much. The Council had installed new multi-level platforms so that all species, regardless of size, could interact comfortably at eye level. Admiral Cax approached the central platform, his massive frame moving with the new grace he had learned from human combat training. "Commander Steele," his voice boomed through the chamber, "the Council has gathered today not just to celebrate victory, but to correct a historic mistake." The Admiral activated a holographic display showing footage from that first meeting. Humans being laughed at, dismissed as too small to matter. Then it shifted to scenes from the war. Human special forces taking down Ravager strongholds, mixed combat teams working in perfect harmony, the final battle at the Ravager homeworld. "We judged you by your size," Cax continued, "and in doing so, we nearly missed the opportunity to learn from humanity's greatest strengths, your adaptability, your tactical thinking, and your ability to turn perceived weaknesses into advantages." Lieutenant Rivers, standing next to Steele, couldn't help but smile as the next announcement came. "Therefore," Cax declared, "Earth is hereby recognized as a primary military power within the Council. Furthermore, we are proud to announce the establishment of the first multi-species Special Forces Academy, with human instructors taking the lead in training the next generation of warriors." The chamber erupted in applause. Representatives from dozens of species, some even smaller than humans, cheered the announcement. The victory over the Ravagers had changed everything. Size was no longer the measure of a species' worth. Steele stepped forward to speak. "6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and accepted a role in support services, knowing that sometimes the best way to teach is to show rather than tell. He gestured to the mixed groups of soldiers around the room. Look at us now. Every species brings its own strengths to our alliance. The Ravagers taught us all that relying on any single advantage, be it size, strength, or technology, leads to weakness. A young council recruit, nearly twice Steele's height, raised his hand. Commander, is it true that I'll be training under human instructors at the new academy? Yes, Steele replied with a smile. And you'll also train alongside species smaller than humans. Every graduate of the academy will learn to work with warriors of all sizes. That's the future of galactic warfare. Admiral Cax picked up a ceremonial weapon, a combination of council craftsmanship and human design principles. Commander Steele, the council wishes to present you with this symbol of our new understanding. Its inscription reads, "Victory belongs not to the largest, but to the smartest, most adaptable, and most cooperative." As Steele accepted the massive weapon, which was almost as tall as he was, laughter filled the chamber. But this time, it was warm and inclusive, with humans laughing along. The ability to laugh at oneself, Steele had taught them, was another sign of true strength. The celebration continued as representatives from various species mingled, shared stories, and discussed future plans. In one corner, a tiny engineer species, even smaller than humans, was excitedly showing their new infiltration technology to a group of giant council warriors. In another, human special forces operators were teaching combat moves to aliens of various sizes. Hard to believe this all started with them laughing at our tiny army, Rivers said to Steele. Steele watched as a massive council warrior carefully demonstrated shield tactics to a mixed group of smaller species. Sometimes the best victories aren't won through force, he replied. They're won by changing how people think. Admiral Cax joined them on the platform. The Ravagers have requested permission to send their first students to the academy, he announced. They say they want to learn what real strength means. Steele nodded approvingly. Accept them. After all, the mark of true power isn't the ability to defeat your enemies, but the ability to turn them into allies, Cax finished, having learned this human wisdom well.